Nscaler 454 here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to work on the Walthers Interstate Oil Company in N scale. I think it's going to complement my refinery that I already have built. If you want to see the video of the refinery, you can go ahead and check the link in the description. Otherwise, we are going to get right into this. So the first thing I need to do is figure out what I'm going to do in terms of modeling colors for these. So I think what I'll do is take a look at the instructions to kind of have an idea of what goes where. So it looks like it's modeled in 4 different colors with some decals. So one of the first things I think I'm going to do is actually wash all this, and then I can go ahead and start my painting. So I've cut away the pieces from the sprues and put them into piles, organizing them based on a color paint, and I realized that I should have primered at least most of this prior to doing that. So before I go any further, I am going to go ahead and spray a coat of primer on it, and then I can go ahead and move on to paint color. Before I laid a coat of primer down, I cleaned up any accessible edges with a knife and file. For primer, I used Tamiya's surface primer, which I used almost half a can. And while that dried, I moved on to building the storage tanks. Be sure to read the instructions, as not all the pieces are the same, as there are 2 vertical tanks and 2 horizontal tanks. For glue, I used Tamiya cement made for plastics. Make sure you rotate each section 90 degrees from the last one, using the lines as a reference. I glued all the accessory pieces to the storage tanks, and now it's ready for paint. For paint, I used Rust-Oleum's flat white primer, and I put them on top of a styrofoam block just to make it easier to paint. For the wooden deck, I decided to try a new technique where I would paint the grooves first. I used Model Master's Engine Flat Black to fill in the grooves, and then gently wiped off the top layer of paint. I then used a mix of Tamiya's brown and dark yellow too to make up the wood color. Once dry, I went over it with Vallejo's black wash for some additional depth. For the deck framing, I chose to simulate a metal finish, so I mixed together Tamiya's dark iron and metallic gray. I later mixed in some light gray because I felt it was still too dark. I airbrushed all the concrete parts with Model Master's Aged Concrete Flat with a few drops of concrete flat. To give it a bit of weathering, I went over it with a black wash. Now I find that coating the surface with some water first makes it easier to get a more even and realistic finish. I recommend against using a paper towel to wipe up the wash, instead allow it to air dry. For the main building and the little shack, I used Tamiya's metallic gray with an airbrush. Before laying paint, I did go over this building with a black wash, which worked a little, but I felt the need to use the wash again, and this definitely added depth and darkened the color. Once the black wash was dry, I strategically went over the surfaces with Vallejo's rust wash for some additional weathering. Now is a good time to start weathering the storage tanks, and once again I used Vallejo's black wash as well as the rust wash. I used a liberal amount of water to keep the wash from drying prematurely. Keep in mind that there are vertical tanks as well as horizontal tanks, so weather accordingly. I can now begin installing the windows and doors. I painted the doors Tamiya brown and then covered it with a quick coat of black wash. The instructions say to install the large window from the outside, but to me it looked ugly and there was gaps all around, so I chose to install it from the inside. And it took some precision, but I think it looks better. I can now start assembly, starting with the main structure. The inside windows can interfere with each other, in which case you may need to do some sanding for clearance. The decks were a bit delicate and required some patience, but I got it done. Of course, I capped it off with the large roof. The shack was very simple, being just 4 sides and a roof. So I've ran into a bit of an issue. In my opinion, this kit should have had a bigger base, as all these little tubes and piping, they all kind of, go into this little shack here. And how are you supposed to line it up and keep it lined up without having a proper base? So even these ones right here, they're separate. How are you supposed to keep those together when this pipe that's in the middle, has to be in a certain spot? So what I think I'm going to do is, I have, luckily, some 060 styrene, which I'm going to cut 6 inches, so basically in half. And I think I'm going to paint it, at least right now I'm thinking earth flat. And I'll scuff it up, like sand it, just to kind of give it some texture, paint it, and then I can have a base that I can put it all together with. Another thing that's kind of bugging me is these storage tanks here, there's no way to fill them. So these are vents along the top. On this side, we have, your maintenance cover. This has a little hole right here that a pipe goes into, but that is your drain pipe. There's no way to fill it. So what I think I'm going to do is, I have some 039 piano wire, and I think I'm going to bend it and maybe drill a couple holes somewhere in here and see if I can manually do that. Not sure if that's going to work, but I'll give it a try. So I got the base cut out and painted. I did use the flat earth color. I'm not sure if that was the right way to go. Maybe I should have went with, a black for pavement or tarmac. But at the end, it doesn't really matter, because I'm changing my mind again, because I don't really know the final orientation that it's going to be in based on my layout. So I'm going to go as far as I can with building these structures and then put it together once the layout's set up. I did build these little tiny square blocks that I painted concrete, just so that they line up with these storage tanks here. Otherwise, they don't work. If I can get my fingers in it, right, like that. So now that is a nice even line, and then I can put this against the structure later or whatever. In any case, I'm going to start working on this piece right here, and we'll just start putting it together and see what happens. First, I completed the vertical storage tanks. Then I moved on to the fill station. I found the holes in the base didn't align very well to support frames, so I ended up cutting the bottoms a little short and glued them directly to the base surface. This gave me a pretty square structure. Once I figured out which way to orientate the large cross member, I was able to install the filler hoses. I did not use any glue on these, as I wanted to adjust the alignment later. After gluing on the S-shaped pipes at the back, I now had the correct position to glue down the ground piping. For some additional detail, I painted the handrails and some lines in the step and walkway using Tamiya's lemon yellow. I chose to install the horizontal storage tanks and connecting pipes all together. Three more pipes connect the storage tanks to the fill station, which I wasn't able to film, but they were a bit challenging to install. Before putting the roof on, I felt it was a good time to do some weathering using some dry powders. I used Vallejo's Rust, Old Rust, and Dark Steel. I did not use the light slate gray. Finally, I did make my own fill piping, which I first had to drill holes into the storage tanks using the smallest drill bit that I had. After bending the 039 piano wire, I painted it with Tamiya's bare metal silver, and I could do a test install. I am not able to glue these into place at this time, as the pipes overhang past the base, so I'll have to secure them once I have the kit on the layout. Well, that about wraps this one up. It's been a fun kit to build. I definitely like painting it, and also I like weathering it. Assembling it, this area, I ran into a few head scratchers, but we got it together. I may do some final weathering on like the main building and whatnot, but that's typical. A couple things I left out. Some of these pipes, like these ones, I don't really know how they're gonna go yet. This sign, I want to find myself a Shell decal that I don't have yet, so because I think I want this to be a Shell RAN manufacturer or whatever. The gas pump, again, I'm not too terribly sure where I'm going to put that. A lot is going to be based on how my layout is and the orientation, and that will set where I put this, the final pipes and whatnot. So, and the barrels, I have painted them, but you know, no need to stick them onto anything just yet. So, if you guys like the video, please hit that like button, subscribe. If you guys want to support the channel, there's a couple links in the description. It would be much appreciated. And as always, thanks for watching.